The aliens watched from orbit, their fleet silently observing the blue planet below. It was a beautiful world, rich in resources, but that wasn't what intrigued them. What drew their attention was the species that called it home: humans. Despite their primitive technology and seemingly chaotic societies, the humans had a fire within them that defied logic. For centuries, they had fought wars, endured plagues, and conquered their environment. Yet, the aliens saw something else, an inherent weakness. Humanity, they reasoned, was like an animal caught in a trap, gnawing at its own limbs in desperation. They could be broken if only the right pressure was applied. And so, they began with the wine. The plan was deceptively simple. Over the course of several months, they'd subtly introduce a new strain of toxin into Earth's most beloved beverage. Wine, the lifeblood of so many civilizations throughout history. A drink that carried the weight of tradition and culture, yet was ultimately a symbol of indulgence and excess. Surely, no one would suspect that the calming liquid could hold such a deadly secret. The toxin was designed to act slowly, so humans wouldn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The aliens were careful, dispersing it across key vineyards and distilleries around the world, ensuring that the toxin's reach would be universal. Their scientists had perfected it, a compound that would weaken the human body, impair the immune system, and cause a slow, agonizing death. The plan was flawless, or so they thought. For months, Earth seemed blissfully unaware of the impending disaster. Wine flowed freely from the vineyards, and humanity reveled in the smooth, intoxicating drink, unaware that each sip brought them closer to their end. Political leaders, intellectuals, and even the poor, no one was safe. The alien commanders monitored with growing satisfaction as the poison took effect. But then, something strange began to happen. The first signs of the poison appeared as expected. People grew ill, their faces turning pale, their strength fading. The alien commanders watched with cold detachment as the cities grew quiet, the streets emptying as the sickened and dying filled the hospitals. Humanity was crumbling under the weight of the toxin. But the reaction they expected was never fully realized. There was no panic, no breakdown of society. Instead, something unexpected occurred. The surviving humans seemed to adapt. It wasn't long before they realized the truth. The poison didn't work as expected. Instead of weakening humanity, it had only made them stronger. The toxin, designed to shut down the human body, was met with a resilience the aliens had never anticipated. Human biology was far more complex than they had assumed. The virus mutated inside their bodies, adapting in ways the aliens couldn't understand. One by one, the sickened survivors began to rise again. They didn't die. They didn't weaken. Instead, they became immune. Some even found themselves able to withstand far stronger toxins, much to the aliens' confusion. The alien commander overseeing the operation, a calculated being known as Zorith, stared at the data with mounting frustration. His perfect plan was unraveling. Earth's humans, the very creatures they had deemed weak and fragile, were not only surviving, but thriving in the face of the toxin. Their bodies had developed a natural resistance. The poison they had crafted to wipe them out had become a catalyst for evolution. Zoritha's frustration turned to fear. The humans had adapted in a way that no other species had ever done. They were no longer simply surviving. They were beginning to fight back. Far below, in a small government lab hidden beneath a mountain, a human scientist named Elena Ramirez stared at the screen in shock. She had been studying the strange pattern of deaths, trying to identify the cause. When she uncovered the aliens' plan, her heart sank. Humanity wasn't just fighting a virus. They were fighting an intelligence far more dangerous than any disease. The clock was ticking. The aliens were watching, waiting for their next move. And the humans, now aware of the threat, were preparing for a battle unlike any the universe had seen before. The wine may have been poisoned, But humanity was about to prove they had already been drinking stronger drinks for centuries. The alien fleet remained stationed above Earth, its commanders nervously monitoring the results of their plan. Initial signs of success had been undeniable. People were dying, cities were quieting, and hospitals were overwhelmed. Humanity was faltering, just as it should have. But as Zorith, the alien commander, pored over the data, he saw something that made his cold heart race. The humans weren't just surviving the poison, they were adapting, evolving in real time. The earliest signs of this unexpected resilience had been subtle. A few individuals who had ingested the wine showed no symptoms, then went about their business as if nothing had changed. Some even seemed more energized, more aware, as if their bodies had grown used to the toxin. At first, the aliens dismissed these anomalies. Surely it was just a fluke. But as the days went by, the survivors became more numerous, and the disease that was supposed to ravage humanity instead seemed to sharpen them. It was a puzzle that Zorith couldn't solve. On the ground, the effects were even more unsettling. Scientists across the globe scrambled to understand why some people were unaffected by the poison while others succumbed to it. Elena Ramirez, a biologist at the Global Research Institute, had been among the first to realize that the alien toxin was not simply a poison, it was a catalyst. The humans who survived the initial symptoms began showing heightened immune responses. Their bodies were reprogramming themselves, creating a shield against the poison. What should have been a death sentence had turned into a bizarre form of evolution. The first real breakthrough came when Ramirez discovered that the toxin interacted with human blood in an unforeseen way. The compound didn't just poison the body. It also triggered the production of certain proteins that gave the immune system a heightened ability to detect and neutralize foreign substances. Over time, this adaptation became more pronounced. Some people developed the ability to metabolize even stronger toxins. What was supposed to be a slow, fatal illness had instead triggered humanity's latent potential. Elena couldn't believe what she was seeing. "They're evolving," she muttered, scanning the data on her terminal. "They're evolving faster than we ever could have imagined." Meanwhile, Zoritha's frustration grew. The aliens had relied on their superior knowledge and advanced technology to execute the perfect plan. They had studied humanity's biology extensively, believing they knew every weakness. But the humans weren't reacting as expected. They were surviving. Worse, they were thriving. And now, whispers of human resistance were spreading like wildfire. The first signs of retaliation came when several human factions, who had initially feared the poison, began organizing. They found that the wine, now tainted with the alien toxin, had become something far more valuable, a tool. The survivors, immune to the effects of the poison, began to weaponize their newfound resistance. They manufactured versions of the toxin, using it to test their newfound abilities. What had been meant as an extinction event became an arms race, with humans developing stronger defenses and even countermeasures against alien technology. Human governments that had been paralyzed with fear now turned into unified forces. Elena's work was shared among researchers worldwide, and soon entire communities were boasting immune populations that could withstand poison, radiation, and toxins beyond anything the aliens had anticipated. It was no longer just about surviving. The humans were preparing for war. And then came the ultimate blow to the alien plan. The toxin spread was accelerating in a way that Zorith hadn't accounted for. The humans, now resistant to the poison, began using their own bodies as a defense mechanism against the aliens' weapons. The first skirmishes broke out, and humans who had once been frightened by the alien presence now fought back with vigor, each victory reinforcing their belief in their ability to win. Zoritha's carefully constructed plan was falling apart. In the quiet rooms of the Alien War Council, he paced restlessly, calculating his next move. The idea of defeat was anathema to him. He had conquered countless planets, but Earth was unlike anything he had ever encountered. These humans, whom his species had underestimated, were proving themselves to be a force unlike any other. But Zorith wasn't ready to concede yet. His pride, his obsession with control, demanded another solution. He would need something far more potent than the poison. If humanity's resilience was to be their strength, he would need to find a way to crush it once and for all. The war had only just begun, and the aliens had underestimated humanity's true strength. Elena, now working with resistance groups to understand the alien agenda, had no idea what was coming next. But she knew one thing for certain: humanity's fight for survival was only going to get harder from here. And this time they would be ready. The war had begun in earnest, and it wasn't just a battle of firepower. It was a clash of cultures, of wills. The alien invaders, once certain that their toxin would cripple humanity, were now facing an unexpected resistance. The toxin that had been their secret weapon was now the catalyst for human rebellion. With every passing day, human cities were becoming bastions of resistance. Their weapon? Wine. In the aftermath of the first wave of poisonings, humans had not only developed a resistance to the toxin, they had turned it into a rallying cry. What the aliens had meant as a tool of subjugation had instead become a symbol of defiance. Where there had been fear, there was now determination. Where there had been panic, there was now strategy. It was in the underground labs of New York City that Elena Ramirez and her team of scientists first realized the full extent of the aliens' failure. They had initially focused on the toxin's biological effects, but they soon discovered that humans weren't simply surviving. They were metabolizing the poison in ways that no other species had. This gave rise to a new kind of warfare. The toxin became both shield and sword. Resistance groups, initially scattered and disorganized, quickly began to harness the power of the toxin. In a world where knowledge could mean life or death, Elena's findings spread like wildfire. Humans began experimenting with the chemical properties of the poison, using it as a means to enhance their body's natural resilience. Those who had already survived the initial exposure to the toxin now held an edge over the invaders. The alien forces, meanwhile, were scrambling to adjust. Zorith and his commanders had watched the human resistance grow with growing dread. Initially, the humans had seemed to be nothing more than prey, weak, ignorant, and primitive. But now they were becoming something else entirely, an unstoppable force. The toxin had not only failed to weaken humanity, it had strengthened them, turning their desperation into a weapon. The first signs of a counteroffensive came from the African continent, where small factions of survivors began to form militant groups. These groups, though scattered and without centralized leadership, quickly adapted the poison as a tool for their struggle. They weaponized it, turning it into a toxin-filled dart that could incapacitate even the most well-armored alien soldiers. The virus that had once been the harbinger of death became the very weapon that turned the tide of battle in humanity's favor. Back in the alien command ship, Zorith was livid. His intelligence reports painted a grim picture. Humanity was not just surviving, they were thriving. The humans had begun to forge their own weapons, creating chemical compounds that not only neutralized the toxin, but also amplified their physical abilities. Their bodies, once vulnerable to the alien poison, had adapted to such an extent that they now fought with a vigor that even the most advanced alien species couldn't match. A new breed of soldier was emerging, one born from the very poison that had been meant to annihilate them. These soldiers had no fear. They had no hesitation. The poison had turned them into something more, something human, and yet entirely different. And as word spread, entire armies of these poisoned warriors began to form, each more determined than the last to defend their home. The human military, once disorganized and overwhelmed, began to gain ground. Coordinated strikes, fueled by the knowledge Elena's team had uncovered, tore through alien forces, crippling their supply lines and reducing their once indomitable technology to rubble. Each victory, no matter how small, became a symbol of humanity's refusal to back down. Zorith knew it was only a matter of time before the human resistance reached a tipping point. He could no longer afford to underestimate them. They were not the weak, helpless creatures he had thought them to be. They were something far more dangerous. And as the tide of battle turned against the invaders, Zorith made a chilling decision. If the humans could turn the poison into a weapon, then perhaps it was time to unleash something far more destructive. The first wave of new alien technology arrived with devastating force. A new strain of nanobots, far more advanced than anything humanity had encountered, was deployed into Earth's atmosphere. These nanobots were designed to be silent, invisible, and utterly lethal. They would infiltrate human bodies on a microscopic level, rewriting their DNA and erasing their resistance to the poison. It was the perfect countermeasure, or so Zorith thought. But as the nanobots were deployed, something unexpected happened. Humans began to resist them, too. Elena's team, now working in tandem with military forces across the globe, discovered that the same mutations that had made humans resistant to the toxin were also beginning to interfere with the nanobots. The humans had evolved further, and their biology was adapting faster than the aliens could innovate. The war had reached a new phase. The poison had failed to destroy humanity. It had only made them stronger. And now, both sides were locked in a race to see who could outpace the other in this strange, brutal contest of survival and evolution. As the battle raged on, Elena watched from her lab, knowing one thing for certain. The humans had become something that no alien force could have ever anticipated. The poison that was meant to be their undoing had become their greatest weapon. And now, the real fight was just beginning. The tides of war were shifting. What had begun as an alien assault, with the promise of swift and unrelenting victory, had evolved into a battle for survival. Humanity, once on the brink of annihilation, was no longer cowering. They were fighting back, adapting and evolving in ways that the invaders could never have predicted. The poison had been their weapon, but it was now humanity's greatest advantage. In the heart of the Global Resistance Headquarters, Elena Ramirez stood before a large holographic display, studying the real-time battlefield reports. Every corner of the planet was ablaze with action. Humans were no longer just surviving. They were organizing, weaponizing their newfound resistance. Elena's team had discovered a way to synthesize the toxin into a series of combat-ready solutions. What had once been a death sentence had now become a critical part of human warfare. The new weapon, a refined version of the original poison, was being deployed strategically across the planet. It had been adapted to not only incapacitate alien soldiers, but to neutralize their technology as well. The toxin, now combined with human ingenuity, was capable of shutting down the advanced alien machinery, rendering the invaders' superior weaponry useless. Humanity had turned the poison into a weapon of mass resistance, and the aliens were starting to feel the weight of their miscalculation. Zorith, the alien commander, had spent countless hours in his war council, watching the data flow and with growing trepidation. His strategy had been flawless, at least it had been. Now, his fleet was in disarray. The humans were launching small, yet coordinated attacks that crippled his forces. What was worse, his own technology was no match for the humans' resilience. It seemed as if every new measure he deployed only spurred the humans to adapt more quickly. "Report," Zorith demanded, his voice cold and devoid of patience. The alien strategist, his second-in-command, stood before the screen. "The toxin's effectiveness is nullified, sir. Human resistance forces are using their immunity to turn our own weapons against us. Their new compounds are disrupting our shields, making it easier for them to breach our lines." Zorith clenched his fists. The aliens had expected the humans to crumble beneath the weight of their technology, their superior intellect. But instead, they had become the masters of their own survival. Each victory for humanity was a reminder of how deeply they had underestimated their enemy. The resistance had begun coordinating strikes across the globe with deadly precision. Using guerrilla tactics honed from years of conflict and strife, the humans struck swiftly, making their presence felt everywhere. The once feeble military forces that had been crushed by the alien onslaught now found their footing, armed with the knowledge and resistance that Elena's research had provided. In cities, villages, and remote regions, humans were fighting back, and they were winning. Elena had become the symbolic heart of the resistance. Her discovery, her work with the toxin, had sparked a revolution. Now she was more than just a scientist. She was a leader, a strategist, a symbol of human willpower. And it was this willpower that turned the tide of battle. As alien forces retreated, forced to abandon their once impregnable bases, humanity seized the opportunity. The resistance grew bolder, more organized. They began launching surprise attacks on alien supply lines, disrupting their communication channels, and targeting key leaders within the alien ranks. Every alien death, every facility destroyed, was a step closer to reclaiming Earth. But the war was far from over. The aliens, desperate to hold their ground, began deploying more lethal forces. New weapons, more sophisticated than the ones that had already failed, were introduced, battleships that could devastate entire cities with a single strike, biological agents that were specifically designed to target human biology. Zorith, having learned nothing from his earlier mistakes, believed that only sheer, overwhelming force could restore his control. However, the humans weren't intimidated. They had become something greater than just a species fighting for survival. They had become a united force, driven by an unstoppable sense of purpose. With each victory, their resolve only hardened. The resistance was no longer scattered and disorganized. It was a global movement. And they had discovered something about themselves that the aliens would never understand. They fought not just for survival, but for the future. The humans weren't simply repelling the alien invasion. They were proving that no matter the odds, they would never be broken. Elena watched the battle reports come in, the names of fallen soldiers scrolling across the screen. Some were allies she'd known for years. Others were strangers who had joined the cause. Each name was a reminder that the war was far from over, but also that it could be won. But just as the humans began to feel the surge of triumph, Zorith unveiled his final weapon, a plan so devastating, so brutal, that it threatened to undo everything they had fought for. Humanity's resilience had pushed the aliens to the brink. Now it was time for the aliens to make one last catastrophic strike. And Elena knew that their greatest challenge had only just begun. The world was at a breaking point. Cities lay in ruins, landscapes scarred by the violence of war. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a strange shift in the air, a flicker of possibility. Humanity's resistance had pushed back the alien invaders to the very edge of extinction. The tables had turned, and now, for the first time since the beginning of the conflict, the aliens had begun to offer something unexpected: peace. The emissary arrived without warning, a sleek, silver vessel descending from the skies to the heart of the United Nations headquarters in New York. For a moment, there was an eerie silence as the world watched, paralyzed by this sudden arrival. Was this a trap? A trick to lull humanity into a false sense of security? Elena Ramirez, now a key figure in the global resistance, stood at the front lines of the decision-making process, her mind whirling as she weighed the possibility of peace against the heavy price it might cost. The alien envoy, a tall, regal being with translucent skin and cold, calculating eyes, emerged from the ship. His voice, when it came, was a soft, almost hypnotic drawl. "We come with an offer," the alien diplomat said, his tone measured. "We have underestimated you humans. What was intended as a simple conquest has become a war we can no longer win. The damage is too great, the resources too scarce. However, there is a way forward, if you agree." Elena listened carefully, her instincts screaming to remain wary. She had seen too much of the aliens' cunning to take them at face value. The cost of survival had already been steep. Her own colleagues, soldiers, and countless civilians had fallen to the alien weapons, their lives extinguished for the sake of a future they might never see. And now, after all the bloodshed, after humanity had fought tooth and nail for its very existence, the aliens were offering peace. The diplomat's words continued to flow, outlining the terms of the proposal. In exchange for a ceasefire, the alien forces will retreat from your planet. No further attacks. You will be left to rebuild. In return, we ask for access to your resources, specifically those found deep within your planet's core. Materials critical to our technology, the knowledge you possess, and the ability to harvest them. It was an offer that sounded too good to be true. Peace without victory. An end to the fighting, an opportunity to rebuild. But the hidden catch was clear. Humanity's planet, its resources, its very future, would be sold to the aliens in exchange for survival. Elena felt a weight settle over her, the decision now more complex than she had ever imagined. "Your demands are steep," she said, her voice steady, but edged with a suspicion she couldn't suppress. "You're asking for a price far beyond just resources. You're asking for access to everything that makes humanity strong, our culture, our future, our sovereignty." The alien diplomat did not flinch. "That is the cost of peace. Your people can rebuild and thrive, but you must let us harvest what we need. This is not negotiable. We have the means to destroy your planet at any time. A single command, and the cities you cherish will be dust. You have seen our power." Elena's mind raced. The temptation of peace was overwhelming. Could humanity afford to continue the war? The death toll was mounting, and the resources to fight back were dwindling. The alien forces were relentless, and despite their setbacks, they had not shown any real signs of weakness. But what would peace mean if it came at the cost of humanity's freedom? The diplomat's proposal had another layer to it, something even more insidious. The aliens, as Elena quickly realized, weren't just interested in material resources. They wanted access to Earth's most guarded secret, the one thing humanity had fought so hard to protect. The knowledge embedded within human biology, the resilience against their poison, was something far more valuable than mere minerals. It was the key to unlocking their future, to conquering other worlds. And then came the revelation that chilled Elena to her core. The aliens already knew about the human capacity for adaptation. They had been watching the humans evolve throughout the course of the war, noting the mutations in their genetic makeup that made them resistant to the poison. They wanted to exploit this knowledge for their own ends, to learn how to engineer similar resilience in their own species, and to potentially use it as a tool to conquer other, more vulnerable races. She turned to the world leaders gathered around her, their faces worn and tired. "We need more time to consider this," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't just about survival. It's about who we are as a species. And if we give up our freedom now, we may never have a chance to regain it." In the silence that followed, the alien diplomat's gaze never wavered. He knew the choice was being made as much in the hearts of humanity as it was in the minds of its leaders. He had come to offer peace, but what he hadn't counted on was the one thing that made humanity unyielding: their refusal to be subjugated, no matter the cost. As the world leaders debated in hushed tones, Elena couldn't help but wonder what the true cost of peace would be. Would humanity truly be able to rebuild without sacrificing their future? Or would this peace be the beginning of a new kind of slavery, one even more insidious than the war they had just fought? Whatever the decision, Elena knew one thing: the price of peace might be far higher than any of them were prepared to pay. The war had torn the world apart, and now humanity stood at a crossroads. The alien forces, having offered peace with their terrible terms, watched as Earth's leaders deliberated over their fate. The message was clear: accept the deal, and humanity could begin rebuilding, but at the cost of its freedom, its sovereignty, and the future of its species. But Elena Ramirez knew better than to trust the alien's word. The poison that had started this conflict, the unrelenting alien technology, and the weight of their demands, all of it pointed to one undeniable truth. Peace, if it came at all, would be a false promise. There was no guarantee that the aliens wouldn't return with even worse terms, or worse yet, no guarantee that they would leave humanity in peace at all. The world had already fought back once, and now it seemed the only way forward was to fight again, this time for everything that mattered. As Elena watched the alien diplomat's smug expression, she felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The survival of the human race was no longer just about resistance. It was about reclaiming their autonomy. But how could they stand against the overwhelming might of the alien forces? The toxin had failed, the nanobots were being neutralized, and the aliens had learned from every failure. Now they were armed with weapons more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. The fight wasn't just for survival. It was a fight for the soul of the planet. A storm was brewing, and humanity's final stand was on the horizon. The decision to reject the peace offer was made in the hushed chambers of world leaders. With one voice, the nations agreed to continue the war, no matter the cost. And Elena, now a symbol of human perseverance, knew what she had to do. It was time to bring the fight directly to the aliens, to show them that humanity would never bow down, no matter how impossible the odds. The final battle would not be fought on a single front, but across the entire planet. Resistance groups, now united under a single banner, prepared to launch a series of coordinated strikes against the alien strongholds. Every soldier, every civilian, every fighter, everyone had a role to play. This wasn't just a military operation. It was the culmination of everything humanity had endured. Each life lost had fueled the fire, and now they would make their stand. As the alien forces dug in, believing they were in control, they had no idea what was coming. The humans had learned, adapted, and become far more than just survivors. They were fighters, resourceful, relentless, and united by a single unbreakable truth. This world was theirs. The first strike hit the alien supply lines with devastating force. The humans, using their new tactics, launched a multi-pronged attack, hitting at the heart of the alien infrastructure. The key to their success wasn't technology, it was their adaptability, the very trait the aliens had tried to suppress. The new compounds and strategies they developed using the toxin had given them the edge. Every human soldier, whether military or civilian, had become a weapon of unparalleled potential. Zorith, still reeling from the earlier setbacks, watched as the human forces tore through his fleets, one strike after another. He had miscalculated. His peace offer was a last-ditch effort to maintain control over a situation that had spiraled out of his grasp. Now, as the humans advanced with terrifying efficiency, he understood that peace was no longer an option. It was extinction or annihilation. As the resistance forces pushed deeper into alien territory, Elena made her move. She led a small team of elite soldiers into the heart of the alien command center, a labyrinth of high-tech fortresses buried beneath the planet's surface. The goal was simple: take out the alien leadership, and the war would be over. The humans had discovered something the aliens hadn't anticipated. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for each other. And it was that unity, that unyielding drive, that would be the turning point. The battle within the alien stronghold was fierce. The humans fought with the ferocity of cornered animals, refusing to relent. Elena moved with purpose, her every step driven by the knowledge that this was the only chance humanity had left. The alien commanders fought back with lethal force, but they were no match for the sheer will of the human fighters. Zorith, standing at the heart of his command center, watched in disbelief as the resistance breached his defenses. His mind raced. He had never encountered an enemy like this. Humanity, once seen as weak, now stood on the brink of victory. They had not only adapted, they had become the very thing the aliens feared, a force that could not be controlled. In the final moments of the battle, Elena, and her team reached the central command hub. She planted the explosive device that would destroy the alien leadership once and for all. The countdown began. As she made her way out, she could hear the distant rumble of the explosion that would change the course of history. The alien empire was crumbling. The invaders had underestimated humanity once again, and this time, there would be no escape. The final stand was over. Humanity had won, but at a cost. The war had scarred the world, and many lives had been lost. But in the ashes of destruction, a new future had been forged. A future where humanity would never again be seen as weak, where their resilience and defiance would echo through the stars for generations to come.